Hi everyone, this is Ileana and thanks for stopping by to see yet another card video. This card I made for a nephew who just turned 3, so it didn't have to be too fancy or anything, and I just kind of slapped it together in quite a bit of a hurry because we had to leave for his birthday party and I had not prepared anything. So I'm using a stamp set from Close to My Heart, and it's called Love Ya Silly. And I'm stamping it onto a small rectangle cut with the Lawn Fawn rectangle dies. The paper that I used is from Cosmo Cricut Social Club. It is an older paper pad, but I thought it would go well for a little boy in green and also a green monster. Now, I don't have very many stamp sets that have a little party hat, but I did have this one from Hero Arts called Wonderful Birthday. And I'm just going to fussy cut the little hat off of this little bird. I'm stamping it with paper tray ink, true black ink, and I do double stamp it so I get a nice dark image. I do try to cut out a different hat that's just a little bit bigger. You'll see it later on in the video, but this is the one that I end up using because it is more size appropriate for the little monster on my card. So I'm just going to fussy cut it, and I'm not going to worry about the little curlicues at the end of the hat. I'm just going to draw those in later. I did want a lot of the pattern paper to show behind the stamped image, and so I used a smaller rectangle to cut out my white cardstock. I'm just trying to figure out where I want the little guy to go so that he's a little more centered. And once I figure out where I want him to go, I'll just go ahead and position my stamps onto the MISTI, and then that way it'll stamp exactly where I want. Here's that other hat that I'm talking about, that I talked about earlier. That one's from the Life of the Party birthday set from Hero Arts, and it was a little too big, but I wanted to try it anyways, and so I cut it out. I did have a little bit of something on my cardstock, and so I just used a clean, damp baby cloth, and I was able to rub it off. And I wanted to test out the ink to make sure that it was going to be the right shade for the green, and I ended up picking a pigment ink from Averell, and it is Jungle, and I stamped it on a piece of scratch paper just to test it out. And when I was happy with it, I just went ahead and stamped it onto the little rectangle die cut. And I end up stamping it 3 times because there is a little bit of texture to that Stamper Select cardstock, and so I wanted to make sure that I had good coverage. I'm using my absorber cloth to clean off my stamp, and then I'm going to line up the sentiment, and I'm going to use the free download that's on my website to help center the greeting, and I'm using the lines to line it up. And what I do is I just count the grid squares on both sides of the sentiment to make sure that there are the same amount on both sides. And I'm testing it out with the little hat, and once again I'm using the wrong hat, but I figured that out later. There is a little bit of a bubble with the transparency, so it keeps sticking up, and what I did was found a magnet, and this is a broken magnet, so just so you know, they are brittle, and if you let them snap together they will break. It's just the nature of the magnet, and but they're still totally usable. So here's one, and I do need to go over to the fulfillment center and pick up a few more magnets because mine end up disappearing or I end up giving them away. I'm pretty sure they're somewhere in my room stuck to something, and I always end up finding them on the back of binders or on the back of tools. So let's move on. I go ahead and I stamped the sentiment with the black onyx ink, and it's also, it stays tacky a little bit so you're able to emboss it. And so I just put some clear embossing powder onto my card. And I did not wait for my heat gun to heat up well enough, and so I do have a little bit of warping. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a piece of white foam to adhere to the back of my piece. And I'm kind of hoping that it's going to flatten out. I'm just using a little bit of score tape to adhere the foam to the cardstock, and I'm using plenty of adhesive because I'm kind of hoping that it will flatten out. And it doesn't, because the foam is not very thick. So it just kind of takes the shape of the warp as well. So I put more adhesive onto the back of the foam, and I think that it'll be fine once it's on the pattern paper and on the card. It should be just fine. And plus, it's for a little 3-year-old, and so I don't think he's going to mind too much. I'm just removing the backing from the adhesive strips, and I'm just going to place it on the front of my card. And I'm trying to see if it's going to straighten out. Can't see it so bad anymore. I'm taking a piece of black cardstock. It's the True Black from Paper Tray Ink. And I'm using my MISTI to crease my cardstock. Sometimes when you cut the cardstock, it may not be completely square, or there is a little bit of, when you fold it, you don't quite fold it quite so well, and so you end up scoring it, and it's a little bit off. But if you use the MISTI to kind of put your crease in it, you can make sure that your cardstock, you have minimal trimming if you do it that way. I hope that makes sense. Now I'm just taking some foam tape to adhere my hat, and this is the one that I do not use, but I have to try it anyways, just to see if it's going to work or not. And one thing that I wish that I would have done with this card is to give the little monster a little bit of a shadow, just to make him look like he's not floating, but it was kind of an afterthought, and I'd already given the card away, and it's maybe something that you want to do. Another thing that I could have done was to ink up the tongue in a different color, but that would have introduced a new color, and but it's just another suggestion. And so here I'm deciding that I want to go ahead and use the smaller hat, and so I'm just cutting a small piece of foam. I also take my black Memento marker, and I also color the edges of the die cut, of the fussy cutting, so that it doesn't show any white edges. And once I get that in place, I'm just going to take a black jelly roll marker and just draw in the tassels to the little hat. I'm just checking to make sure, because the jelly roll, for some reason the end cap is white, and I wanted to make sure that I did not put the cap on the wrong marker, and so I had to test it out. And here I'm just taking some little, what are these little things called? Googly eyes. I'm picking 3 of the smallest googly eyes to put on my card. And I start to mess with these because I think they have some kind of adhesive on the back, and so I'm kind of picking at the back of the googly eyes, trying to peel off the backing, but there is no backing. And I end up using some multi-matte medium because it does dry matte, and I just squirt 3 little dots on there just to get the eyes to stick. And it doesn't have to be perfect because the little monster has freckles, and so if you don't get them exactly where you want them, it's all right, because it just looks like there's a freckle underneath. So I'm just putting these little eyeballs on, and I'm just going to let it dry. And that is my card. So you could see that you could put a little shadow under the little monster, but it's okay because it's going to a little 3-year-old. So have a great day and give my video a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe.